All right, season 3, episode 9, part 3 of the retirement series, talking about retirement income distribution. And today I'm going to be talking about guardrails. And guardrails are basically a way to help your retirement income plan be as successful as possible, allowing you to take the most money out of your portfolio, staying within your goals, and really it adds a layer of information and protection onto the 4% rule that I discussed last time. And the guardrail analysis and research was done by a guy named John Guyton. And I'm going to play a clip from him speaking on Michael Kitsis's Financial Advisor Success podcast, and he talks about how he uses it with clients and gives a great analogy specifically to using guardrails and your retirement being a really long road trip. So you can think of guardrails like on a highway, and the speed that you go on that retirement road trip, we'll call it, is analogous to the withdrawals that you take out of your portfolio. So like I had talked about last time was that 4% rule. Now we're going to go ahead and add a layer onto that, which again helps protect portfolios and makes your retirement as successful as possible. I will go ahead and get that clip rolling now, and then I will come back and discuss that afterward.
We use a lot of analogies. We were talking about how we, talk to clients. We say now, imagine, if you think about the withdrawals that you take over a lifetime in retirement, think about that as like a financial road trip. You are going to drive for a long time. You hope it's a long time. You hope it's a great trip. But you are going to encounter a lot. The first thing is, I say to you, if you're going to be driving down that, down the road, so to speak, your withdrawal rate is analogous to your speed. So the higher the withdrawal rate, the faster you're going. And if I were to say to you now, in your car, you have no brakes and no mirrors, how fast will you drive? And the answer is slower. Then that may seem like a ridiculous question, but the 4% rule of Bengen's rule, you get an inflation adjusted increase every year, is analogous to having no brakes and no mirrors, because you never do anything other than increase by the rate of inflation. So you're not slowing down. And if you're not slowing down, you don't need brakes. And secondly, you do that each and every year, regardless of the conditions around you. So you don't need to know what the conditions are around you. Thus, you need no mirrors. So what we say is, but actually, we know that if you do have brakes, you can tap the brake, back off your withdrawals a little bit. And you also have mirrors so that you can take into account the conditions. And this is where, Michael, we bring in the work that you did back in 2000. You can tell me whether it was 8 or 9 that it first came out on dynamic asset allocation adjustments and how that affects safe withdrawals, which I consider to be the most recent innovation in this category. Nothing since, I don't think, really moves the needle. So we use that in our practice. So we just say, because you have this flexibility, you can go faster. And that's how we explain it.
Would you drive your car faster with brakes and mirrors to make adjustments than without? Well, yes, then great. Would you take a higher withdrawal rate when you have the ability to make adjustments and apply the brakes? Yes.
But the other piece is, there's no free lunch here. If someone says, don't ever tell me that I need to, not have a raise for inflation, or don't ever tell me that I need to take a little bit less, it's like, oh, okay, well, then that withdrawal rate doesn't work.
Then we're going to dial that number back down.
That's exactly right. I mean, seriously, there is no free lunch.
So let's unpack that and look more at what they were talking about. Obviously, some of that was relatively technical, so I wanted to go back through and just talk about everything they mentioned and give some context. Side note, there's some construction going on around my house right now where I'm recording this, so I just wanted to say I apologize if there's any background noise at all. So talking about that guardrail approach in general, one key term that we're talking about is withdrawal rate. So last episode, just as a recap, I talked about 4% withdrawal rate. So if someone has $1 million and they take out $40,000 in retirement in year one, that's 4% of their portfolio. So really what John Guyton tried to do, he did do in his research, and that's who you just heard from on Michael Kitsis's podcast. Guyton was talking about using that guardrail approach and setting parameters within the portfolio. So a specific example could be, if someone started with a $1 million portfolio and they decided to take out 4%, well, that would be $40,000. And there could be a rule that one would set in their plan that says if the withdrawal rate goes up by 20%, where if the withdrawal rate goes from 4% to now you're taking out 4.8% or 5%, or if that withdrawal rate goes up, meaning that your portfolio went down, then you would take a 10% pay cut. So the next year you, instead of, that $40,000 amount, you would get $36,000. So instead of $3,300 a month, that person would get $3,000 per month for the next 12 months. And the same would work in reverse. So if your portfolio went up, meaning that your withdrawal rate went down, you would also get a pay increase over that next 12-month period. So basically, in that analogy that Guyton was using on Kitsis's podcast, was that we're adding mirrors and basically keeping track of our surroundings, right? We're adding the vehicle has windows now and it has mirrors so that you can see what's going on outside of the plan itself, so that you're not just always taking out 4%. And what this does is it actually increases what we would call a success rate, which I'm going to talk about here in a second, in that retirement plan. So using the rules of withdrawals, right? And if we made it, where we start our starting withdrawal rate was 4%, but if that went up to 5%, the client would take a pay cut. And if the withdrawal rate went down to 3%, the client would take a pay increase. In simplified fashion, it just means that if the portfolio goes up and hits a certain guardrail on the upside, then the client can spend more money. If the portfolio goes down and hits a lower guardrail, then the client takes less money out of that portfolio the next year. And there's a lot of variables inside of this, and that method of the guardrail approach is called the withdrawal rate method, which is okay, and it's a good benchmark and baseline, but it doesn't necessarily account for certain things like one-off expenses, or it's got to really be clean, and the client really has to buy into that, and it's not as dynamic as what I'm going to talk about here in a second, which is more Monte Carlo based withdrawal strategies. And the purpose of me getting a little bit into the weeds here is to give clients and prospects a look under the hood of what we're doing behind the scenes to come up with the recommendations. A lot of times you'll get, I'll have people say like, what exactly do you do? And it's hard to put into words and context without boring them to death. But basically, I'm going to give some insight on what we do behind the scenes, and then also just share what the client sees and what that outcome is when it gets presented to them. So speaking more to the Monte Carlo analysis, basically what that is it looks at thousands upon thousands of different outcomes, market conditions, variables inside of a client's projections and inside of a client's financial plan. And it's what all good financial planners essentially use. And the thought there is, let's give ourselves a baseline or a benchmark for what could happen and be vaguely right than totally wrong just by guessing. And that's the thought there. However, a lot of times it will give clients a false sense of either security, or it will, make them sad, right? because it's a success or failure, right? If the software says, oh, there's an 80% chance of success, well, some clients could look at that and say, well, that means there's a 20% chance of failure. So what can I do? And so what we're going to talk about is using guardrails for client withdrawals. Again, having some rules built in. And the basic takeaway is that if the portfolio goes up, the client can get a pay increase. And if the portfolio goes down, the client might take a pay cut for the next 12 months. But using dynamic guardrails really adds to the overall outcome success of the portfolio, and also keeps the client keen to the idea of, hey, okay, I know that I don't even hit a guardrail until my portfolio goes from $1 million to whatever, 820,000 or whatever the number is. So if I'm at 900,000, there's no need to worry. They know that, we're still looking at their plan and using a dynamic strategy and monitoring that correctly, rather than just saying, oh, we'll look at this later, or doing some type of bogus monitoring. So looking at that, and also some things that we want to keep in the back of our mind in terms of just assumptions, where when we're constructing these plans, again, I've been talking about this, and it's one of my just decision-making core values, is that there's an art and a science to everything. So an example of that would be, what return rate or what rate of return do we use in a given portfolio for a retirement income plan? And if we used historical returns where bonds are returning 5-6%, that might be pretty high, where we can use what we call regime-based returns and look at, okay, let's say that, bonds over the next 20 years are not going to return 4, 5, 6%. They're going to return something like 2. And how will that affect the plan? So we can tweak these variables and make it where the client can be very, very conservative in their income plan, or, less conservative in their income plan in terms of the amount that they're taking out and the rules that we would use for that. So it's important to identify those. And then also one thing to look at is some research done by David Blanchett, who's one of the biggest retirement researchers out there, talking about the retirement income spending smile. So he talks about the first few years of retirement, people are traveling, people are, wanting to get out and do things, and they're enjoying retirement. And then their income might actually go down because they've done all the things they want to do, and now they're just living day to day, and every day is a Saturday, and they're just enjoying that time, but they're not necessarily spending more than they were the first few years of retirement. So in essence, it makes, a downward trajectory. And then the other half of that smile, if you picture a U like a smile, at the end of the plan, healthcare costs come into play, and that becomes a bigger expense. So their overall spending increases. So I know I said a lot there, but basically unpacking that in a simple format is, we're going to look at returns in the portfolio as regime-based, meaning where we're at today, not necessarily what happened 40 years ago or, something like that. And we're going to take a look at the specific client's retirement spending goals and like what their lifestyle preferences are, because that is the art element of what we're doing when we're planning and projecting out these plans. Then what we're going to do is use the Monte Carlo analysis based on the parameters that we just set, right? We're doing the regime-based returns, and we're doing the retirement income smile, or we're saying, hey, for the first 15 years of retirement, let's use a 3 or 4% inflation adjustment, but then the last 15 years of retirement in a 30-year projected plan, we'll use a 1% inflation, because you may not be spending as much in your 80s as you did in your 60s. So we're taking that real world approach and just stress testing it against different variables. So again, a little bit into the weeds, but I think it's important for clients to get some type of view of what we're doing under the hood in terms of planning, and then they get their 1-page printout, in my business at least, of, hey, here's exactly what we're going to do in terms of guardrails. So what I mean specifically by that, if I were to give an example, is let's say that we're working with a couple in retirement and they have $1 million portfolio and they receive $3,500 a month in Social Security income. And we want to start with that probability of success percentage. Let's say that it's a 95% probability of success. And that would be their recommended spending, level, the 95% probability of success spending. If we then said, okay, well, let's take a look at, what those guardrails would be, right? If we can say, let's implement a guardrail strategy that targets 80% on the lower guardrail in terms of probability of success and a 99% probability of success, what would that look like? Remember, the initial goal here is starting at 95% success rate on $1 million portfolio, and this client has $3,500 per month of Social Security income. Well, we have software that implements these things and can do these stress tests, and let's say it spits out that the client can utilize $6,800 per month out of their investment portfolio, and that would be a 95% probability based on probability of success based on the parameters that we've set. Now, some people may be doing the math in their heads and thinking, okay, $6,800 per month out of the portfolio, that's way more than a 4% withdrawal rate. And it is, but remember, there's other factors, like they already have the $3,500 a month from Social Security, and they may not need a ton of money per month to meet their goals. On top of that, thinking about life expectancies and ages and things like that. So really what I'm trying to do is just explain the guardrail philosophy in general to people. And then what we do is look at each person's specific variables, which will give us the level of spending that's comfortable for them. So bear with me. So now if we say, okay, well, what would the portfolio value have to be if, instead of starting with a 95% probability of success, we did a 99% probability of success. In that case, the upper guardrail would be 1.1 million for the portfolio. If we do the similar process to figure out, remember, our goal here is to have guardrails set at 80% probability of success and 99% probability of success. So those are the guardrails, if you can picture those, and then start them at a 95% probability of success. So somewhere in the higher end of the success rate, but still comfortable for them. 80% probability of success, in that case, finds the lower guardrail to be roughly 800,000 or a little bit more, but it's right around 800,000. Then what we would need to do is figure out the spending adjustment for that client. So remember, we were starting with $6,800 per month and figuring out how to develop that income should they hit a guardrail. So what we would do is run their plan, and there's definitely people listening that could be confused as far as how the math works out now, but here's what the client actually sees and gets. And this part is probably the most important and the biggest takeaway from using a guardrail strategy to give the client some peace of mind. We would say, okay, given your current Social Security income and your portfolio that's valued at about $1 million, let's start by spending $6,800 per month. And again, that would reflect the initial success rate of 95% success probability. However, if tomorrow your portfolio fell to $800,000, we would cut your spending to $6,500 per month instead of the initial $6,800 a month. So that would trigger that lower guardrail. So this client would see, okay, I'm starting at $6,800 per month, but if I hit the lower guardrail, it goes down to $6,500. So I know that, I at least can expect and have some expectations, which are important in financial planning, for how that portfolio would, or how that withdrawal would change out of my portfolio. On the other end of the guardrail, or the other guardrail, I should say, if, I'd say, okay, client, if tomorrow your portfolio grew from 1 million to 1.1, we could increase your spending. So instead of $6,800 a month, we were talking $7,100 per month. So you'd get $300 more per month more. And that level would be triggered by the upper guardrail. So what we're doing here, instead of just using hard and fast rules for withdrawal rates, like I mentioned at the beginning, using, 4%, and if the withdrawal rate went to 5%, you take a pay cut, and if it went to 3%, you take a pay increase. Now we're using dynamic strategies and saying, okay, for this specific client, knowing their specific income needs and goals, and blending that in with Social Security and pensions and annuities and their fixed income streams, what makes sense as a withdrawal amount for this client, rather than necessarily looking at the withdrawal rate, like a 4% rule out of a portfolio. So it works a lot better for the clients around dollar values, rather than talking about percentages, percent withdrawal rates. And that is really helpful for a lot of clients to see, just, a visual on whether it's a one pager or, whatever it is, just to see, okay, cool. So I know that once my portfolio hits X dollars, here's the monthly amount that I would get out of my portfolio. And I know that if, the portfolio goes up, here's how much I would get relative to what I'm getting now. So it answers a lot of questions for that client, and also answers one big question, especially that people are asking right now, is should we do something different? And I think that's really key, to have these strategies and solutions. And so now talking about why we do this strategy, right? And so this is one that I implement with clients, especially those in retirement. And the results are, pretty astonishing, where you can look at just $1 million portfolio, taking out 4% and having no guardrails, or I call it no rules at all. And that might be somewhere between 65 and 70% successful in, running 10,000 different scenarios. But adding guardrails and having some rules built in on that retirement road trip can move that potential success rate from 65 to 70 up to 95, 96, 97, etc., and really help that client not only have more dollars for legacy if they have legacy goals, but have more peace of mind knowing that their withdrawal strategy is rock solid for any market condition. So that's just really key to think about, is using a strategy that is more in depth than just, hey, let's take out 4% per year, can have huge value adds and impacts on your overall portfolio and its success throughout retirement. So just to wrap up here, I know that this episode is pretty technical. Looking back at the beginning and talking about the initial, they're called Guyton-Klinger guardrails. Basically, you're starting at a withdrawal rate. If your portfolio goes down, you take a pay cut. If your portfolio goes up, you take a pay increase. But what we want to narrow in on is, what exactly does that mean for you as the investor and as the retiree? So we'll add in different levels of probability and success, and making sure that your plan literally just cannot fail, because we won't let it, based on things we can't control, like the market, right? We don't want to have your plan fail because of something we can't control. So what we want to do is put in these controllable methods into the portfolio and add these guardrails, add these rules that are based on your assumptions and your lifestyle, your retirement style, and how you think about retirement and spending and hobbies and things like that. And then we do Monte Carlo based guardrails. Again, basically looking at, okay, and I'm going to use that same example. Let's say that someone has $1 million and they get $3,500 per month from Social Security. We would say, okay, let's build out probability of success guardrails and make it where your probability of success comfort level is 80% success on the low guardrail and 99% success on the higher guardrail. And then we start their income somewhere in the middle. If the portfolio hits the lower guardrail, they know how many dollars per month they will get fewer, or how many fewer dollars per month they'll get. And if the guardrail gets hit on the upper end, meaning the portfolio goes up, they know exactly the dollar amount that they would get per month for hitting that upper guardrail. So again, it's just having different and tangible, I guess, insights for the client to see exactly how their income will change given any type of market condition is really key for having success for your overall portfolio. Now, what I'm going to mention here as I wrap this up is that if there are any people that are interested, I put together a top retirement strategies guide, and it's like 20 something pages long, but it covers the 4% rule. It covers guardrails, like a higher level version of guardrails. It covers annuities, which I'm going to talk about next episode. And it also talks about using some hedges in terms of like hedged ETFs in the market. If you're interested in that guide, just send me an email, info@lifepointplanning.com, and I can send that guide over. It's for people that, want to understand a little bit more without getting super far into the weeds. And it's just a really good starting point and something that people can use to ask questions about. So, info@lifepointplanning.com. If you're interested, I can send that guide over. And again, I hope this was helpful. I didn't mean to get too far into the weeds, but guardrails are huge. And, from the advisor side, it takes some planning and expertise, but on the client side, which is the biggest takeaway that you'll get, is knowing exactly what your retirement income will be day one when you retire, and how it might change based on the market's movements throughout your retirement. That's key, because knowing exactly the dollar amount changes from your income not only gives people peace of mind, but it makes their portfolio last with higher success rates throughout their retirement and gives them a huge optimal retirement planning strategy. As always, thanks so much for listening. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I look forward to catching everyone next time.